Hello, hello, hello. My name is Felix. My name is Felix. I'm from Ledger. First thing I actually wanted to double check with you guys, if possible, is if you can let me know how at least the audio and the main video would be. Just making sure everything is going okay on my end. But I'm here today to do a general AMA onboarding. We'll go through a couple of the steps that we might want to do to set up, your device. You might want to set up your device with initially. For example, normally I'd like to go through some things that we might not go through in the help center as well, being that especially there are help center articles that go through, how to set up the device, how to, restore your device with an existing recovery phrase as well. So just wanting to wait for your questions. If you can pop them through into the chat, I'll have a colleague of mine answering those questions there going forward. I'll just make sure he's in the chat at the moment. As we wait for people to roll in, I did get a question, or I did receive a question directly internally that mentioned how to connect Ledger Live, your Ledger device to MetaMask. And it's something that I want to go through now. It's something that I actually use MetaMask quite a lot. I actually used a lot of the in-browser extensions to connect with my Ledger device. It is quite a common question to ask whether or not it's safe, and it definitely is something that is safe to do as long as you're not signing any malicious transactions or anything like that, and also especially if you're not giving away your 24 words. So we can probably go into that, and we'll see how we go. And we'll see if we can give you guys a hand with getting that all set up as well. Now, like I mentioned, we'll have one of my colleagues in the chat trying to answer the questions, but let's go ahead. If you guys want to follow along as well, you can actually go to Ledger. Actually, normally just type Ledger support MetaMask, and it will come up for us in particular. And we can try and give you guys a link to follow along. You can see here this Academy article here, first one that comes up, does go through and mention how to connect that to MetaMask. Connect to MetaMask with your Ledger device. Remember, not importing your recovery phrase. It's pretty simple. I've actually got a device that I actually don't really use to set this up, so we'll have a new one to set that up going forward. So here you can go, first you'd have to install MetaMask. You just go to MetaMask. I think it's metamask.io. I might get that wrong. We'll see how we go. But once you've gone onto that, you should be able to download it. I've already got it installed. You can't see it on my screen, but it'll be up here as well. Let's see if I'll open that up, and essentially what you'll want to do is use the Connect Hardware Wallet button in particular. This button actually is, this is hurting my eyes a little bit, but there we go. But when you connect the hardware wallet, like I said, Ledger, like Ledger Live, it'll ask, your Ledger device to potentially give it the public address that it needs to check, and also know which address you're managing from. So it'll have all of your potential tokens on there. You can even add custom tokens if you want to. I sometimes need to do so to manage some custom assets. So you can see here, if I go back to our screen, it does have a lot of fluff, if I'm honest, but the first step one is how to get connected. So you log on, use the Connect Hardware Wallet. If I wait for that to open up, we'll see how we go. And then once you do that, you actually have to open your Ledger device. You can make sure that you're also running the latest firmware of the device, as well as on the firmware device, as well as the Ethereum application as well. So we can make sure to do that as well. As I go through that, I did mention it before, but if you are arriving late, please, you can make sure to pop your make sure to pop your questions into the chat. We'll have a one of my colleagues answer the questions for you. Yes, we can see that pop up there. I think with the stream it is a bit slower than usual, and you can see my huge stack here. But once we jump into the top right, you can see connect hardware wallet with what you'd want to do as well. Make sure to, oh, I actually forgot my pin for this device. I don't really use this. This is actually a live device as well. I'm actually doing this all, we're doing it live. So if you know that reference, congratulations, but let's keep going. Basically what it'll do once it loads up is, yes, there we go. We'll be able to log in as well. Let's make sure I have the Ethereum app open. I actually see a Apple. You mentioned to use Kepler wallet to manage your Ledger device with a Kepler wallet. Let's do that next, actually, because I do use Kepler. You can actually, you can't see it, but I actually do have it on my extensions as well. So let's open this up, Ledger device, and let's connect. And you can see here, because I'm using HID, you can just see it's already, with my Ledger device, is open and on the Ethereum app. You might get some weird error messages if the Ethereum app is not already open, for example. So that's something to consider if that's the case, just as a heads up. Boom. All right. And so basically, essentially, MetaMask is asking me now, or asking the device for a Ledger, for an address. And you can see here, the addresses appear here as well. So you've got different derivation paths. This is something I think I was speaking to a customer about previously with regards to what would be the purpose of derivation paths. Essentially, just the different branches of a tree, if you think about it in that way, that whatever front end you're using, so whether that be Ledger Live, MetaMask, Rabby, or whatever, would ask your Ledger device for the public keys to check, say, hey, what addresses can you show me? And I am getting an error. I would suspect because of the derivation path is not right. Request device must be handled just to show permission requests. I'm probably just messing around with it there too much. But that's the really quick and simple way to go through how we would add to MetaMask. Like I said before, you'll be able to see all of those steps down here below. So once you've connected, you can actually just start managing your assets from there. Totally fine. I'll actually go and make sure we fully connect the device as well going forward before we move on to Kepler. But Kepler is a really interesting one. I use it quite often as well. So let's pop in there. It'll take a little bit of time to add, and there you go. That is my new address with nothing there. So I do see one thing here. What is the address to connect Ledger wallet to MetaMask? It is not an address, it's an extension. So you would head to metamask.io to download an extension if you're using MetaMask. You can use other options. Assumpta Shipmoney, I think is your name. You can use other wallets as well, not just MetaMask if you want. So you can use Rabby, Tallyho, other potential extension wallets you can use. But once you've got the extension installed, then you would go to the extension itself, and then you can select this circle to actually open the Connect Hardware Wallet button, just because I do see a kind of relevant one there as well. Now, the steps are pretty similar, considering if you would be using other kind of extension wallets. So other ones, not just, let's say, the next one I'm going to pop into would be Kepler, but other ones might be, let's say, Soulflare, Phantom, as well. Those are Solana-based browser extension wallets that you might be able to connect your hardware wallet to, right? So it's totally something. Those are totally some things that you can do as well. Totally possible. But let's jump onto Kepler and let's actually see how you might do that in particular. I'm actually going to navigate to Kepler just to keep it real, as if I'm starting from the start, and we can go from there. So if I just go to Kepler, it's probably going to come up with the, what is it? Kepler is a famous astrophysicist, if I remember correctly. I've been talking too much about Kepler, the wallet extension, and that's been pushed out of my brain, unfortunately. But let's keep going. I'll have the Kepler dashboard come up. You can see I just Googled Kepler. And just make sure you're going to wallet.kepler.app. In particular, you'll see for me, it'll come up with the extension since I already had it installed. You should be able to just jump onto the extension, wherever you get your extensions for your browser to be able to get it. Now, I think one thing to also mention as well is that there is absolutely no reason for you to input your recovery phrase. Definitely isn't necessarily something you'd normally be doing in a normal operation. Just so you guys are aware as well. All right. So once that loads up, which it will take a little bit of time, we'll be able to see, what is in my dashboard, my huge stack of funds here. Oh, I actually turned on private mode, so it's okay. But essentially, you would normally be wanting to, let's jump out of here and then let's log in as if we were from the start, and then we can give you guys a full overview of how to do that. Oops. So if I go to Kepler within the top right hand side, once I've installed it, remember, then we can essentially use the same connect hardware wallet feature as well. Let's see if I can get Kepler ledger support, and you guys can follow along as well. If you guys are connecting with Kepler, you can see here we even have a Help Center article for that. So we try to internally write as much as we can, even for things that may not be directly within our purview, but obviously this is. You just need to make sure you have the Cosmos app. And then you can get the extension. You can see this link here. Let me check the URL so you guys have some idea. Yes, it's a Chrome browser, Chrome browser web store kind of link. So you'll be able to find that there, or you can look in the extensions part for Chrome as well. Let's make sure I load up Kepler and we'll stop from getting sidetracked. We'll go from there. Just to continue, if you guys are arriving late, I'm sure I can see you guys are popping the questions in the chat as well. But if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll try to answer them as best we can. All right, so you can see here, let's just sign out. Boom. I'll just enter my super secret password there. I'm going to launch this bad boy as well. Now, the reason that you'd want to make sure that you enter or connect your hardware wallet as opposed to entering your recovery phrase specifically is because if you're, and I think I've mentioned this quite a few times before, that if your computer is compromised, then you're going to have issues with because like the attacker that has gained access to computer will be able to see your recovery phrase. But if we use the connect hardware wallet feature, in this case you can see here there's the connect hardware wallet, but the connect ledger in this case here. The reason you'd want to do that is because the recovery phrase doesn't leave the device ever. And because it doesn't leave the device, it means that if someone's attacking you and, they can see your addresses, they can see where you've sent it to and from, but that would be something that anyone that has a Block Explorer, so Block Explorers, generally speaking, are free as well, so they're fully and publicly available, they'd be able to see your transactions. But as long as they can't sign your transaction, this should be okay, right? If they don't have your private keys, your recovery phrase, which are generally considered two separate individual things, but I like to conflate them to simplify things for most people. If someone else doesn't have that access to that, then you'll still be able to manage the assets that you own and control, right? So let's call this YT test for no reason. And for fun, let's just make a random derivation path as well. Now, I've actually got the incorrect app open. So one thing to mention as well, you can see here that Kepler wants to connect and it says it's paired, it's not paired. You can make sure to have the correct app open before you try to connect to your Ledger device as well. That normally helps in terms of experience, I've found, if I can find the actual application. Okay, so it looks like I've actually uninstalled it, but this gives us an opportunity to actually go about and try and install the application as well. And you can see here, nothing's lost here. We're totally fine at this stage. I'll just go and find my instance of Ledger Live, and yeah, we'll go from there. All right, so let's keep going. So once I've installed this, essentially we can go in, connect the Ledger, and then we can actually show our address as well. We'll go from there. All right. Other than that, if you guys keep coming in, please pop your questions in the chat. I'll also be going over a newer type of, it might not be new for you. You might have seen it elsewhere as well. If you guys are also terminally online, this type of scam that would be promising, incredible returns, 10K a day, 1K a day, that kind of thing. And they seem to use the promise of MEV. And if you guys internally, I think I have chatted about MEV before. It's something that I love talking about. So we will try to get to that towards the end, just to make sure, though, that you guys don't fall for it. Please, if anything is too good to be true, please do not interact with anything like that. It's not going to be good for you. Again, this is not my balance, by the way. This is a way that you can make sure and check and test other people. So this is not me. Anyway, we're going to be installing the Cosmos app onto my Ledger device, and we'll go from there. Boom. Should already be open. We'll wait for that to detect and load up on the device as well. All right. We're going to allow the Ledger Manager. It's actually changed now on the latest firmware. Is say allow a secure connection with Ledger, which is totally normal. It's the same message. We just wanted to be more explicit, I imagine. All right. Now, once we jump in there, what we'll do is we'll actually, once we jump in there, we'll actually install the Cosmos app, and then we'll go from there. Okay, it's already been submitted, and we're waiting for Ledger Live to allow that going forward. Just a bit of side note while we're waiting. If you guys didn't know, that's actually me testing with a celebrity address. It's actually Twitter. It's actually Kobe rather on Twitter. Just having a look and testing it out with that. But you can see here, let's go Cosmos, and we'll go from there. All right. So this process is pretty much the same for all of the devices. So if you have a X LNS Plus, even in LNS, they're going to be pretty much the same. It's just a matter of what you see here will be different as well. So let's keep going. We'll wait for that to install. And then we can just go back into Kepler and then essentially go through the same process. And I think while we're waiting, I can jump out. You can actually follow along on the process here where it says how to connect. You essentially put in the account name, and then you can actually use your connection to actually connect to the device as well. You can see actually mine's still loading, and it's going to take a while here as well. But I mean, while I talk about that, I can pop back over. We're talking about MEV, a topic that I think I love talking about. Essentially, let's get the notes up. I mean, if you don't know already, it's basically any way that you can use to order transactions. You might want to be before someone else's transaction, for example. And the reason I'm explaining it is because if these guys are promising like 10K profits, like why are they providing it to you? It's just another version of a investment scam. They're just promising a lot of value. They might ask you to download something. They might ask you to put your private keys into a specific place. And all of these things are essentially a way for you to get your funds, right? And so I mention it specifically so that it's something that hopefully you guys can avoid, and to make sure that you guys stay safe and keep your assets safe as well. So that's already been installed. I can actually just open Cosmos straight away, jump right back into Kepler, and that is the old. So I can connect. I can do YTube test with some random derivation path for no reason. Let's jump in there and connect. Okay, looks like we're getting another message. I like this. Okay, let's do it without the derivation path, which is normally the way that I would suggest, actually. All right. But if we found an actual bug, I'll be able to report this straight away, and we can get that fixed up as soon as possible. That's not to say that Kepler is the only way. I'm just offering an alternative, because we do have support for that within Ledger as well. I do see one comment there, Coit. You've mentioned don't trust anyone who asks for your keys, and that's 110% right. That's really. I wouldn't even just say astute. It's just no one needs to know about your private keys. They are yours, and that's the way that you own, your assets. So after I've done that, if you see I've come back here, I can actually go up into my. I can go up to my extension up here, and then go up and select the specific account that I want to be using as well. All right. And you can go there as well. And this will just be a totally different dashboard, and you'll be able to see what assets I have and everything like that as well. So just another way for you to manage your assets there. So if you guys aren't using, Ledger Live, you don't want to use Ledger Live for some particular reason, you can always use Kepler. Hopefully I should have been able to run through that for you. You can also use other wallets for other assets as well. I know that there's Eternal, Euro, Inami for Cardano-based assets too. All right. Now, I'm just going to see if there's any other questions in the chat. If you guys have asked anything that maybe I'll be able to answer straight away. I know my colleague is answering in the chat as well. There we go. Okay. Let's go back, and I'll just go back to mention one thing I was talking about with regards to MEV. And this is what one tweet looks like. And it's the thing that I want you to avoid. So I made sure actually to black out the actual names. I don't want to dox anyone, and the URL in particular. And it's the thing that we want you guys to avoid. So please, guys, it's too good to be true. Avoid these in particular. Calm, I see that you had a question. Let me see if I could scroll up or double check for it in particular. You've just updated Ledger Live, you rebooted the LNX, reset the PIN, and the account was created like new. Fortunately, through the mobile application, you can see that there is access to the account. So I just wanted to clarify because, first of all, it sounds like the first thing that I would think about is that once you updated Ledger Live, it sounds like the Ledger Nano X was reset back to factory settings. All right, maybe you reset, like you said, you reset the PIN and the phrases. Okay, there you go. So if you have a new recovery phrase and the device was set up with a new recovery phrase, you'll have access to a different set of addresses. The reason that you see your addresses in your mobile application is because it isn't synced like a cloud service in any way. And through that, it's already still showing the existing addresses that you haven't moved or changed on your mobile device, right? So the first thing I'd be wondering is you might have two recovery phrases. And if you do, it'd be to make sure that you restore the Ledger device with an existing recovery phrase. I've actually got this here already. And the reason for that is because using the recovery phrase, you actually deterministically access the addresses. You don't, it isn't something that's set to the device itself. It isn't something that we know or we saw for you. It's something that recovery phrase, the mnemonic phrase, seed phrase, is something when you put it into the device based on the recovery phrase and based on the derivation path, it gets a specific address for you based on, the cryptocurrency as well. So that would be the first thing I'd want to do is make sure if you reset the device back to factory settings once again, and then make sure you restore with not the second recovery phrase that you got, but the first one that you would have had, that you created it with initially. That would be the first thing that comes to mind after reading that question as well. It might be something that happens, when you update Ledger Live and then you update the firmware on your Ledger device. What might happen is that it'll ask you, if you have your recovery phrase there. And the reason it does that is because if the Ledger device needs to reset itself for whatever reason, that you have that there to be able to restore it back to factory settings. So that's the reason why that might happen. It could have happened, if it's a particularly big update as well. So hopefully that does answer your question, Calm. Essentially, I'm hoping that you do restore the recovery phrase back from the existing one that you had on the device itself. So you already did that. So all the 24 words, all PIN. So the first thing there with that one, if you already did that, is this you're using the old words, the ones registered from the beginning. Okay. It might be something we need to delve into with you, but I would suspect that if they don't go back to the original addresses, then you would not be able to at all. You need to essentially have the recovery phrase that correspond to the address. That's kind of how it would need to be. But, there are some potential things that might come up if you're using a weird derivation path, for example. If you set up the account in a different way than within Ledger Live, it might be something to consider. So there are a couple of options there, but essentially, if you don't have the words that correspond to the specific address, it wouldn't be something that we would have, that anyone else would have. It would be something that you might need to might be more prudent to actually really try and find in particular. So I would really be happy to speak to you further about that if you get a case number at all, if you want to look into more details. But essentially, it's about finding the specific recovery phrase that corresponds to the address. The other thing would be, maybe we can go into Calm what particular assets that you're trying to restore as well. Maybe that might have a particular that might have an effect on whether Ledger Live could see it or not. But I just wanted to I'm trying to check if there's any other outs here that we might have, so just to make sure. I think just at the bottom there, Apple, you mentioned, where do you find your private keys on the Ledger? You wouldn't actually find your private keys on the Ledger device at all. You'd actually never get your recovery phrase from the device or the private keys, because that could be a potential security risk if you were able to get that out in particular. Not really something that we can be done, but if you do ever, if you need to do it, and we actually only mention this in terms of emergencies, there is a tool called the Ian Coleman tool. It's not something I'd ever recommend anyone do. If you haven't already heard of it, I wouldn't have normally recommended it. And normally there's a huge list of potential risk factors as well that I'd want to go through with you. So please only do that if it's absolutely necessary. You can even get a hold of us. We might try to dissuade you from it initially, but if it's something that you absolutely needed for whatever reason, it might be something that could help you. But again, definitely not recommended. All right. Just going to see if we can, if you guys have any more questions, you can pop them in the chat, or we'll try and go from there. We'll see if we can give you a hand. All right, Calm, you mentioned you've written down the names. I'm assuming you mean the recovery phrase. You photographed everything. Checked 3 times, I did everything. That would be ringing red flags to me in particular, because if you've stored the recovery phrase on any digital device, someone could have access to it, right? And so it might mean that you see transactions that come out from the accounts. If not, we'll have to continue from there. But again, if you think you've written them down correctly, but they don't correspond to the same addresses that you were using before, for example, then maybe you were using a passphrase. Now, that's the other thing that I might not expect, because it is more of an advanced feature. But essentially, a passphrase, Ledger support, is essentially, some people have referred to it as a 25th word on top of your 24 words. I normally just think of it as a passphrase, because I think it ruins I can't really explain it as well. I think it kind of ruins how people think about it. It's not an extra word on top or anything like that. It's actually kind of like a password that you would use, and you'd scramble it a little bit more. There's an analogy that Dan, actually one of my colleagues, has mentioned before about the ground floor of a house being all of the accounts that you can access with your recovery phrase, and each door might correspond to each address or each currency. But if you go up another level, so you go upstairs, essentially you use a passphrase and you go upstairs to one level, and it's a entirely new space that you can use to access different addresses, right? Might be a little more confusing, to be honest, but essentially it's an advanced feature that you can use essentially to create like a plausible deniability address. You can attach it to a PIN or a passphrase. If that sounds familiar to you, it might be something that you would have used previously. But if and that could also affect when you're adding in accounts, what addresses would show, right? So those would be the specific things. I think if you're going to try and manage your assets with the wrong recovery phrase, you might get an error message that comes up like this. And it's wrong private keys for account is the specific name of the error that you might get. It might be here. Please check that your hardware wallet is set up with the recovery phrase or passphrase associated with the selected account. And essentially, these are the only specific things that could happen with regards to what would have happened there. The device would reset. If you have multiple devices, if you have multiple recovery phrases, and if your account was protected by a passphrase. So those are the only things there. You can see the account through the phone. The account wouldn't matter through the phone. It's just about what recovery phrase is on the device to be able to access it. So if you're entering the words correctly, you restore everything. You can't see in Ledger Live anymore. Apps are gone from the Ledger. So it's about adding the apps into Ledger Live, and then it's also about adding the accounts in Ledger Live as well on your desktop. So that's the specific thing that you'd need to do if you had the same recovery phrase there. Now, and I'll get to Yasia and Anthony as well. Yasia, you mentioned the last firmware update to Ledger 9X introduced an ugly, a bit hurt there, non-intuitive pin interface. How can you revert back to the old interface, or when can we expect the pin interface to be fixed? That is the actual fix. You would not be able to revert back, and that would be for security reasons as a whole. Yasia, so it's not something you can revert at all. I'll definitely take on the feedback and pass it on as well, but it's not something that would be could be reverted at all. That is, again, for security reasons. You mentioned, Anthony, thanks. How do I connect and take them off of Ledger onto your Trust wallet? I would not normally suggest that at all, Anthony. If you absolutely have to do so, you might be able to use, yes, Ian Coleman, but it wouldn't be something that I'd be going through here. It's a bit outside of the wheelhouse because, again, you need to make sure that you already, if you want to get the recovery phrase, you need to make sure you already have it. You can't get the recovery phrase from the device itself. So, but once you have the recovery phrase, then you can put it into another tool to get the private keys from that, just to give you a brief overview. But again, you can't just take it off a Ledger device if you don't already have it outside. That would obviously be a security issue. Now, can Ledger extension interfere with other extensions already on MetaMask? I'm assuming you mean other wallet extensions or something. Your Ledger, and if you mean Ledger extension by Ledger Connect, which I actually don't have access to here, that would be something that can interfere. Like I sometimes have a lot of issues with managing multiple wallets in particular. So, but if you mean in terms of adding a Ledger address using the Connect hardware wallet feature, does it interfere with the other addresses? It does not. So just try to cover all the bases there for you, Assumpta. Tom Khan, yes, I did have a chance to look at it. In particular, I was going to answer you today, but did get a little swamped. But I did think, just as a heads up, that at least in terms of managing with multiple balance changes and things like that, that you might be seeing that there was potentially a fix on the back end, actually. So no update required. That might be able to help with your issues there. I wanted to look through your issue in much more detail to actually make sure that was the case, but I was hoping that a fix that I'd been tracking internally should be the one that fixed your issue. So do apologize for the delay, but I'll make sure to continue to make sure to follow up with you for sure. But I was keeping you in mind, Tom Khan, so don't worry about that at all. All right, just gonna see if there's any other questions. If you guys want to pop them into chat, we still have my colleague in here as well. We'll be here for another 10-15 minutes as well, and we can see if we can answer any other questions that you have. I know you mentioned to please make a video about my crypto and my Ether wallet as well. I'm just going to double check wow, they do like that. My Ether, because we normally do have some videos on the Ledger support page individually. I can't remember if there's one for this. We might need to update it, but if I remember correctly, there might be some on YouTube as well. Dan definitely does a lot of those in particular. All right, Apple, you mentioned, is there an app to check if I copied the passphrase correctly, since we are no longer able to see the passphrase again after the first setup? In terms of checking the passphrase, so not the recovery phrase, but the passphrase. The passphrase, you can make sure you open a particular, if you open a particular address, and you can just double check the receive address. This is what I normally do, actually, to make sure I'm using the correct passphrase, because you can actually have multiple passphrases. So it's just about making sure you actually add the, you're managing it with the specific account that you want to be managing it with. If you mean recovery phrase, there is a recovery check app in particular. You can find that here, and you can actually use that to actually check the recovery phrase that's on the app. So I just wanted to make sure we covered all bases again with regards to what you can check. You can definitely check that your recovery phrase is correct, but if you want to check your passphrase, it's normally a little bit of a workaround, but you just but you just make sure you add and try to manage or receive an address, receive to a particular account. I normally just use my zero index Ethereum account. It's kind of a way to check what addresses I'm using. So hopefully that's a bit of a workaround there, but no specific way to say, hey, you're using passphrase 123 or you're using passphrase ABC. That also would be a bit of a security issue. Now, you've mentioned, does Ledger Live, not me, mentioned, does Ledger Live add Mina plan to add Mina protocol? Does Ledger plan to add Mina protocol to Ledger Live? Using Google Chrome is not great. I can double check if we have that internally as well, just to see if it's on the horizon. It's definitely something that's been mentioned by one of my colleagues as well. Where is this bad boy? Shout out to, actually I shouldn't mention his name. He wants to be fully undoxed, so that's all good. Let's have a look. But yeah, I mean, if it's not an issue, you could potentially use another browser, but I'm assuming that it's just browsers in general, using it in browser, that's a bit of an issue, which I do understand totally. All right, let's get that logged on. So yeah, if you guys can pop your questions into chat. Again, can't really go into like when questions. It's definitely a common question that we do get. But we can never give really any time frames with regards to like when something is going to come out or anything like that. We just want to make sure we deploy the best product that we can to you guys as well. So when, can't really say, but I mean, I see 2014 you mentioned XDC and HBAR. They are already supported with a Ledger device. You just may need to use some external services for them as well. So for those two in particular, they are already supported on Ledger managed addresses. Definitely been helping quite a few people getting them set up on both XDC and HBAR as well. All right. Let's wait for this to load up now. And yeah, again, just while we're starting to close up, just to make sure you guys, please don't give, yes, general browsers is a pain. Yep, no worries, not me. But just making sure you guys, please don't give out 24 words. I think I say it all the time, so you guys are, I'm sure, sick of it. Please don't sign in transactions that you don't trust from sketchy websites. This is, how people with might be able to sign away their NFTs or anything like that. I definitely remember there was a time when people were getting scammed by promises of animating their NFTs. it's a bit tough, but you definitely shouldn't have been signing those transactions. So, you know, just because you're just because you use the hardware wallet doesn't mean that it has to be, you know, tucked away in a safe all the time. You can use it, you know, to sign and make transactions and things like that. But I think the main important thing is like if you know exactly what you're signing. Mark, you've mentioned, while I'm looking at not me's question, Mark, you've mentioned, can I ask about a problem I'm having with MetaMask wallet and Ledger? We did go through how to connect it, but if you do have what's happening for you exactly, like, are you getting an error message? Are you getting stuck anywhere? Can you not see a token? Maybe if you can jump into more detail, we can try and go into that further with you. Essentially, if you can't see a token, you can add it into, you can make sure to add it, and there's a custom contract option or feature that you can add into MetaMask if you're having trouble with the connection itself. I personally normally make sure to use Chrome because I like to use Web Page ID, but I do know that Dan likes to use Firefox in particular and using Web USB. So both are possible to use. Yes, you can use MetaMask with Firefox and Ledger. That is something that actually my colleague Dan, that you might have seen yesterday, does like to use. So should totally be possible. It's just a matter of using Web USB, if I remember correctly, or you Web U2F. I can double check that. But essentially, it's a different method of connection than Web HID. And as long as you're using that, you should be okay from there. Different preferences for different people, but should definitely be possible, Mark. And let me finish up, or just wait for that to load up for you, not me. See if it's on the horizon. I'm going to see if it's in chat as well. Oops. I'm really off today, it seems. Okay. Now, please keep popping those questions into chat as well, just as we're closing up. And then, if you have any other questions, we'll try to answer them as best we can. Hopefully, you guys are having a good week. It is only Tuesday, hopefully, where we experience all the moons. All right. That's a bit cringe. Let's keep going. Mina, let's have a look. All right, it's definitely on the horizon there, not me. So it's definitely there. It's definitely being worked on. Sorry. So definitely look out for that, not me. You can also follow us on Twitter, or you can. We'd probably be shouting it from the rooftops here as well. So definitely keep your ears posted about that one. Mark, you've mentioned. Do I have to use the black cable that it came with? You do not, as long as it's a data cable. I saw there's an issue using the cable. It shouldn't be an issue using the cable unless if you're using it via mobile, there would be an issue because it's not supported for MetaMask Mobile yet. But if you're using it on a desktop, it shouldn't be an issue, generally speaking. There might be some edge cases that I might be able to think of as well. Jawad, hello. If you have any questions, Jawad, pop them in the chat. Let's see if there's any other questions that might have been missed up above. Calm. Calm, get a hold of us, actually, because if you really think that you've written everything down correctly, I can try to go through what things should be. Maybe we can try to figure out some more things, but generally speaking, it's about understanding which recovery phrase corresponds to the address in particular. All right. There we go. Let's see if there's any more questions that we can ask. Marie Benoil, does Ledger have an official merch store or a merch standard events? I'd love a hoodie. To be honest, so would I. I don't have a hoodie yet, a Ledger hoodie. All right, so Jawad, how can we set up a new Ledger Nano X with an old Ledger Nano X because the old one battery issue, so I want to transfer all the funds to the new one? good news, you don't have to transfer the funds at all. You just need to, Jawad, make sure you restore the new device with the existing recovery phrase. So you remember that recovery phrase that you had initially? You just need to get that. And instead of set up as new device, remember you're not setting it up as a new device. You want to restore it with an existing recovery phrase. So just make sure you can type in restore. You can type in this phrase in particular, restore your ledger accounts with your recovery phrase, and you'll be able to put in the existing recovery phrase. Yes, come. Yeah, definitely get a hold of me, because if definitely make sure not to reinstall, Ledger Live, but to install the apps on the device. We can go through everything in more detail if we need to go through the specific addresses. I don't want to alarm you or anything, because but there is a potential that if you don't have the right recovery phrase, then we might not be able to access the funds. But of course, that's why if you get a hold of me, we can try and work through everything in a more private space, not through DMs. By the way, we would never DM, we would never ask you to DM, and we'd never want you to give us the recovery phrase either. Just make sure you can head to support.ledger.com, or actually anywhere on the support page. There's actually a purple button on the bottom right hand side that says contact us. There we go. So just as a heads up for that one, for you, Calm. Now, Jawad, being that you've already set up as a new device, that's totally okay. What you can do is reset the device back to factory settings. So what you do is enter the PIN incorrectly 3 times on the new device, right? The one that you want to be set up correctly. Once that's done, it'll actually reset it. So it'll actually completely reset itself. And what you can do from there is actually go back and set up a restore as a new device. That's normally the quickest way. There is a way to reset it in the settings as well. But generally I consider entering the PIN incorrectly 3 times a lot quicker. So that's what I would normally suggest there. Now you mentioned Marius, you mentioned when will support. Now again, I can never honestly go into when, but in terms of support for unstoppable domain tokens, unstoppable domain NFTs, so they're another ENS essentially. When will it be possible to send and receive with it? Definitely a good point, and I can pass on the feedback, but no time frame as to when, unfortunately. Combat T, you've mentioned, hello, can I use the Ledger Nano S Plus with your Android phone? You indeed can. I have my phone here, and I use it with my Ledger Nano S pretty much all the time. And can you update it with just your phone? You can absolutely do that. You just need to make sure to do that with a cable, of course. And I think the other thing would be that your phone hopefully has a USB-C port, or maybe a micro USB port, maybe, but hopefully a USB-C port in particular. That way you can use a USB-C to USB-C cable, and then you can plug it into the Nano S Plus, do all the updates and everything like that as per normal. But I think that's we're just about where we'll finish up there. Hopefully I'll get a whole if you just mention my name, Calm, I'll make sure to they'll make sure to pass the ticket on to me. If you just mention that you want to speak to me, it should be okay. My name's Felix as well. So yeah, hopefully we can try to work through that with you if we need to. Hello, you mentioned any update for Ledger Live? Or just last question, because I still can't monitor transactions history at CRO, but outside of Ledger Live, no problem with the transaction history. There is an update to Ledger Live in particular. If you're not on the latest update, 2.54, 2.54 is the latest version. Thanks, Combat T. Yes, USB-C is perfect. It's exactly what I've got on my OnePlus. So if you've got a USB-C to USB-C cable, you should be able to get sorted from there. So with regards to the CRO transactions, on the latest update, you should be able to hopefully see those transactions if I remember correctly. But if not, you can always get an update for that one as well. All right. Yes, Apple. The transactions, so CRO on Kepler would be different from CRO in many other scenarios as well. So Kepler is just a different network. you can potentially get them transferred over. A bit more of an in-depth process that I won't be able to do in 1 or 2 minutes, but definitely something we might be able to help you with in terms of how to send it. If it's the easiest process, you can probably send it to an exchange, Apple. Hopefully that answers all of your questions from there. Sorry about cutting everything a little bit short, but if you guys have any more questions, jump into support.ledger.com. We'll be able to try to give you guys a hand from there and get you guys all sorted. And yes, we'll be here, and there will be some US sessions the next 2 days, but we'll also be here on Thursday and Friday as well. Friday on Twitter, Thursday another AMA on stream. We'll see who's going to be the guest of honor, whether that's me or if it's going to be with Dan, or what that might involve as well. But you can always catch us all on social media, all over YouTube as well, if you're trying to get a hold of us live too. Cool. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of the week. Thanks again for all the questions. Hopefully I didn't miss anything too much. Get a hold of us on support.ledger.com if you have any more questions. Thanks.